Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Authenticate podcast. Today, I have a guest on who is very, very special to me. She's been a paramount part of my healing journey, and she's been somebody that I've been wanting to have on this long before this podcast was even born. I've brought it up to her many times throughout our relationship that she was going to be one of the first people I wanted to have on here when I started this. So she's here today for the second episode. We've been together. I joke that we're in a relationship, but we've been together for 4 years now. She's a licensed psychotherapist, but she's my therapist. We're coming up on our 4-year anniversary now. So she has changed my life in thousands of different ways. She has saved my life many times. She has been there with me through the hardest times in my entire life and here for some of my best days, today being one of them. So welcome, Cena.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you.
This is the best day of my life. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited.
And for confidentiality purposes, you're blowing that out of the water, not me.
Oh, yeah.
Therapists are not supposed to be like, this is my client, but it's all her. So.
Yeah, I think everyone knows by now that I have forever told everyone about you. I reference you always, and I'm very, as we discussed before, open about this. So.
Yeah, you're my number one fan.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I know. I do know. So today we are going to talk, it's going to be like a bit of a Q&A. So we're going to talk a little bit at first about just like general therapy questions of like getting started, what to expect, what the experience is like, things of that nature. And then we're kind of going to pivot a little bit into more relationship things. That is the plan. I don't know that that's where it's going to go.
Just gonna let it flow.
There's times where I've even logged into sessions with you or into sessions with her, and I'm like, this is what I want to talk about today. And then we end up talking about 30 different things that were relevant anyway. Yeah. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Who you are, what you do, and whatnot?
So my name is Cena. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I practice holistically, which means that I'm a little bit non-traditional, little mind, body, spirit, bringing together some of the more clinical and also some of the not so clinical, mindfulness, meditation, spirituality, energy healing, metaphysics, things like that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. You're the best. You are the best. Before we get into the questions, I just want to ask you, I think what's going through my head, even texting you to come on here and even this morning, is just not even ask you, but I feel like it's kind of like a moment for us that I just can't believe that this is what's happening right now to where we started. And I remember I was getting very emotional about it this morning, that I was like, holy shit, 4 years ago, I felt like I was just this lost version of I'm getting my period any fucking day. So the laughs are going to come and the tears are probably going to come. But I was just I can't even remember that version of myself. I can't. And I know that it's just unfathomable to me. It feels like a different lifetime. It feels all these crazy, crazy things. And I do know, I give myself probably not enough grace and compassion for the part that I played in that. But
not nearly enough.
I was going to say.
It was all Cena. I'm like, no, it wasn't.
Well, what I was going to say, because I probably would have said that, but that I don't even think that, it's not that I don't think, I know for a fact I wouldn't have been here without therapy and without you. I do know that. And I'm not even saying that I would have never gotten here.
Yeah.
But the way that I have viewed you and therapy, and this is kind of where we'll end up going in the direction with the questions and stuff, but I explain it to people as having a therapist is having a GPS, that it's I didn't make as many wrong turns. I definitely made some, but I didn't make as many as I would have without you. I think that it's just it's a guide and it's direction. And then yes, a lot of it's done on your own. You're the one driving the car, but I would have not been able to get to my destination, I think, as seamless. I shouldn't say seamless because it wasn't seamless, but with less detours and less frustration without therapy. Okay. And I think that actually we can just get into the first question, because this is exactly where I want to go, is what do you feel is the biggest misconception about therapy?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to also acknowledge the moment I had today. Same as you, look how far we've come.
Yeah, I know. Look at us.
And what a gift it is for me to get to see this and to have seen you through the other phases of your life where you weren't this connected to yourself doing like this type of work. Like
I would have never, ever,
I was just going to say, if I were to tell you 4 years ago, like, okay, just stick with me. And in 4 years from now, you will be like running your own business in a happy relationship, like blah, blah, you would be like, what?
No,
like,
no, like
no
nothing,
way.
nothing that like, and you know what? I think you're right before we get into the question is that like, I think because it's my personal experience, I'm aware of what it was. And I don't think other people know what it was, but like, it really was like a complete whitewash. Like I was in a completely different relationship. I was a completely different person with completely different views, completely different fears. Like I was legitimately like a completely different person, and not that I'm like shitting on that version of myself, but not in a good way. Like it wasn't like this. It was a real, like legitimately, like even just being on here and thinking about the podcast, like you saying being here, like I was just even then so insecure and timid and like not, if you would have even told me that this would happen, I think a part of me would have been excited, but I think a majority of me would have been like scared shitless of like, I can't do that.
Yeah,
like
you would
I
have
can't
been
do
obsessing for the last 4 years about like, well, what am I going to talk about? And
right.
Like
right. And if you would have told me, I would have had to like leave that relationship and then like a year alone. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Right.
I feel like because like the following that you have and the people that watch your videos and listen to you and are coached by you, like they only see this version of you.
Right.
I'm here to tell everyone that she works her ass off to be this. Like, it's not just like, this didn't like come easily to you. This didn't come naturally to you. Like, you really fought for this version of yourself. Yeah. Like, for a really long time and really consistently. Yeah. And that's like what I want your people to know is like, they see you and they're like, I want that. And and
I agree. That's what I want them to know too. I think that's where I get imposter syndrome sometimes, that I'm like, wait, I wasn't born this way. Yeah, like I wasn't like, this isn't easy, or it wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. And it's not like you just one day woke up and like changed everything. Like it was week after week after week after tough lesson after tough lesson after tough lesson. Yeah. And things that happened to you that you didn't expect, that you had to navigate and grieve and I think the larger message is that for you, you worked really hard to become who you are today, and that you can guide people down that same path now. Yeah. But then also to like segue into the question of like, what's the biggest misconception about therapy is like, is that it's one of them, and there's a few, is that it's fast. And like, it should be like, oh, like, why is she, like, I hear people all the time like, oh, why is she still acting like that? Like, isn't she in therapy? Like, when we're in therapy, it means we're fucking working on it, you know, like we're trying, like we're healing, you know, and it's a process.
I love so much that you just said that, because going back to what you just said of how far I have come, I still obviously see you, and I still have to meet with you, and I still have things that are hard for me. And I think that's actually in the last couple days has been my biggest frustration with myself still, that I've had the mindset of like, why is this taking so long? Like, why is this still a thing? Sure. Like, why am I still not?
Why do I still have anxiety? Why do I still,
or why am I still obsessing over this? Or why is this habit still so hard for me to kick, or this limiting belief or whatever? And I do try to look back and be like, all right, it hasn't been 0% progress. Like, even if it's been 30% over a year, it's still been progress. And that's hard. Like, it's because it's not quick. It's not overnight. And obviously everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants, you know, the instant gratification. And like, I just want to be better, and I just want to be better now. Like, that's why I think, and I'm not knocking anyone's personal decisions, but that's why I think medication is very popular as well, that it's like, just fix me now. Like, just fix me now. And obviously there's scenarios where you do need to be fixed or stabilized now, you know, but I think people, like you said, I think that they think it's quick and they want quick. So I think when it's not quick, they're quick to be like,
it doesn't work.
Fuck this.
It's not for me.
Yeah, it's not for me.
2 sessions and they're like, I'm good. It's like, no, you're not.
No, right. You're either like, I'm good, or like, I'm not good quick enough. So like, it's just not for me.
Right. Or you'll blame the therapist, or you'll say therapy in general. Like, it's not whatever. But
well, that was going to be one of the questions that I was going to ask you later, but I'll just ask you now then. That's something I see a lot with people, that like, I got very lucky with you. Like, we literally, I remember when I was personal training, and I remember it was at like my little suite, and I emailed you, and then you emailed me back like that night. I literally remember the shit that I was in that day. And then I remember you emailed me back right away. We hopped on the phone and we hung up, and I remember just being like, we're so compatible. Like that was so easy. Like that was so flowy. And our relationship since for the last 4 years has been nothing but seamless and flowy and compatible and growing. Like we have this beautiful relationship, but I do realize especially the work that I do now that that's actually not common. Like that's not common at all. Like I got very lucky. Like I almost see it as like dating in my eyes, where like you usually have to date around before you find someone good, but I had like my love at first sight, and it's like, oh, I have my one and done, you know, but that's not very common.
We're high school sweethearts.
What would you say to people? Because I hear that so often where people log on with me and they're like, it's just stale. Like, I don't feel like we're compatible, but sometimes they will say it's been 2 sessions, it's been 3 sessions. Like, how do you navigate? Like, would you compare it to dating in the sense that you do have to date around with therapists, or do you think kind of like dating as well, give it more than just a first date? Like,
for sure, give it more than one session. But I mean, I would say even before before the session begins, like that consultation call is important.
Yeah.
You know, like ask questions, like ask what their approach is. Ask like what would be your approach when it comes to anxiety. They're not going to go through a treatment plan with you in a 20-minute consultation, but they are going to tell you the modalities that they use. Right. I would tell people to like do their own research about the type of therapy and therapist that they want. There are many different modalities. There's CBT, there's DBT, there's IFS, there's EMDR. Like, do your own research about what you know your shit is. If you struggle with anxiety, if you struggle with depression, if you struggle with trauma, like look up the best therapies for that, and then find a therapist that is versed in that kind of modality. So that's one tip. But talk to the therapist. Like, you know if you're clicking with someone or not, or just over the phone, and then give it a few sessions. And if it doesn't feel okay, then, you know, find yourself another therapist. But also, if you're in therapy already and you feel like your therapy is stale, like I would tell people to like talk about that with the therapist. Yeah. And that just means that both of you have to like reconvene about what are we doing here? Like what are our goals and intentions right now? So if you like your therapist but you don't feel like you're getting enough out of it, either you've outgrown that therapist or you need to revamp your goals. Yeah. So that's a part of it. I also feel like for anyone who's listening, like our therapy relationship is really special and unique, and I don't think that everyone has a perfect match. Like,
I think that's why I push so many people onto you, that I'm like, just go to Cena, because I'm like, she's like my best friend. Like we're like, but I get that that's not always the case.
It's not always the case, and it doesn't always have to be. Like,
that I think that's important to say. It doesn't have to be that way.
When I even think about my own caseload, like not every relationship that I have with my clients is like ours. Like there are clients that have flat out said to me, I don't want to know anything about your personal life. Like I don't want, and you're like, can I ask you something? You know, like you always want to know, and I'll always tell you if you ask. But there are clients that say that, like they need me to be like
What's
this.
What's their reason for that? Was that what it is? They need to see you in a certain.
Yes, I need to be the Wizard of Oz. I need to be the person behind the screen that has no emotions, no feelings, no trauma, no problems. I need to be like the wise, all-knowing presence. I couldn't do that. It's harder, you know, and it's some
I couldn't do
preference.
that even as the patient. I'm saying like that. But I mean, everyone's different. Like that's what works for them. Yeah.
So, you know, some people don't want a therapist that feels like their best friend. You know, some people want
a therapist that feels like their therapist.
Yes, that's like and that's also like very old school therapy is like you should never self-disclose to a patient according to like traditional like.
I remember like thinking that with coaching. I remember being like, I cannot talk about myself. Like I should not, and I should never. And that was like my thing going into it, was going by like the rules. And then I remember one of my first sessions that I started talking to somebody about like their relationship anxiety, talking about mine. She literally started to cry, and she's like, I didn't know you had experience with this. And I was just like, well, like I thought I just claimed to you that. And she's like, yeah, but I didn't know that you've actually felt these things and thought these things, and that you're in the relationship still, that you experience this with. And then it was like our relationship changed and our sessions changed, and she opened up more. So that's when I was just like, maybe I do need to like do this more often when it's relevant and fitting, and it feels like I can offer them a perspective, like not just to be like, this is what's going on for me right now, but just like this is relevant right now.
No, it has to benefit the client. But also therapy and coaching are different like that. Coaching, you really should be like telling them like, I've been through what you've been through, like here's how I did it, and here's how you're gonna do it. But like traditional psychoanalysis has always been like, you don't tell the patient anything about yourself, you know, because you're not supposed to. But I have always towed the line between therapist and coach. And I just, it's harder for me to just be this, like, I have no thoughts, no feelings, no, you know, no trauma. I'm, you know, it's just, it doesn't work.
You're like, I can't even say that without laughing.
You know, like I'm a human being. And I have always felt that when it's done the right way and tastefully, it always helps clients to know, like, I know exactly what you're feeling.
And I think like we know that we're human beings, but when you're talking to somebody else, like you don't realize, like a therapist wise, like you don't realize that they are. Like there's obviously been times at the beginning of our relationship where I'm like, she has it all figured out. Like she's probably like, even if she has experienced anxiety, like she definitely doesn't anymore. She's definitely happy all the time. Never. Her relationship is always perfect. And I always just remember thinking that. And then I realized too, like after experiencing that with you and then actually getting to know you more, that I'm like, I disclaim in my first session with people now that I'm like, we're on the same path. I might just be 100 steps ahead of you, but like, I'm not in a different world than you. Like I'm not in a different realm. Like I don't have shit figured out. Like not figured out, but you know what I mean? Like,
and it's also, human. It would be so like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like hypocritical, I guess, or counter to what I teach about like self-compassion is such a huge part, you know, like
I know.
of like really owning your own humanity. So I like to tell people to, like, when they're thinking about therapy or coaching or healing of any kind, is like, you know, no matter how much therapy you've had, no matter how much energy healing, meditation, whatever, like you're still human. Like you're always going to be human. You're going to have a full range of human feelings, and like that's fine. So,
and I think what's hard is that like when you start therapy, you realize almost how human you are, and like you have like a gripe with it, and then you start to heal, and then I think the idea becomes like, I almost want to be less human. I want to be so healed and so enlightened and all of these things. And I think that's also something that I still gripe with sometimes, that I'm like, no, being human is not, or being a healed human, like that's not what that is. And I was going to ask you another one of the questions that I remember when we first started seeing each other, that like you set like almost like an intention goal with me, or like a vision statement of like, well, what do you want? And I'm like, well, I just want to be healed. And you're like, well, what does that mean to you? And I'm like, well, I'm not anxious anymore. I'm not fearful anymore. Like, I'm just happy all the time. Like I had some realness in there of like, I want to be happy alone and this and that. But I remember you saying to me, like, that's not what healed is. So like, can you tell people, to you at least, what you feel that being healed really is?
Sure.
That it's not being Jesus Christ, and it's not being Buddha, and it's not like, what is it?
So shout out to Jesus and Buddha. I mean, our fucking role models.
Yeah, for real.
We love Jesus. Both of them. We love Jesus. Yeah. But both of them were just men. Yeah. That really, really completely embodied their divine self within their human existence. And for the rest of us, it's 50-50. So 50% of me is divine. 50% of me is God.
Is of God, right?
50% of me is a flawed, neurotic fucking disaster. Yeah. And that's the human part. And healing and being healed means I love her. Yeah. I love that part. I have fallen in love with the journey of knowing that self and to know all of myself. Yeah. So I don't think, I think we all throw around the word healed, and I'm guilty of that too. Like I'm someone who will say like, okay, here's how to heal, this attachment style or blah, 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 whatever. Right. It's just like, it's the language that we use. But when I talk about healing, the biggest indicator to me that healing has occurred is if I have made some like minute progress in some direction about anything.
You're doing it differently than you once have.
Just a little. If I have more self-awareness around it, if I have more self-compassion around it.
You've totally taught me that. I feel like there's been sessions where I've logged on with you and I'm like, I fucked up again, but and I'm like going crazy, and you're like, but you realize you fucked up. You realized it in the moment. Like, you knew quicker this time that it was the wrong move than denying it all that it wasn't the wrong move. And I'm like, Oh, I never thought about it that way because I'm so quick, and I feel like a lot of us are to like beat ourselves up and be like, you did it again, like slap on the wrist, like you're so flawed, you're so bad, you're so unlovable, and you're so this, you're so that, that you miss the companion street of like, or compassion street, compassion street of just like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. And like how, like, that's hard.
And also what, like, healing to me is like, one, it's like some sort of growth and progress, but two, it's can I go inward with this and get curious?
Yeah. You've taught me curiosity big time.
Right? Like when I was working through, let's use binge eating disorder as an example, I knew that I was healing not when my binges disappeared, which they did eventually,
right?
But when I would binge, and after that binge, I was able to sit with myself and put a hand over my heart and say, okay, Cena, what happened?
Yeah.
What was going on for you? What were you feeling? Why, what were you hoping that food was going to give you?
Right.
Did you eat enough today? Are you okay? Did you have anxiety? Were you feeling insecure? Were you feeling stressed? What's up? Like, and also like, I love you. Like, it's all right. You're human. You did that thing that we promised ourselves we weren't going to do. Like, what can we learn from this?
Yeah.
How is this an opportunity for growth right in this moment?
Right.
You've probably heard me say this, but the present moment is your point of power.
Yeah, you always say it, and I always use it.
It is the most important thing to know is like healing happens in this moment. In this moment, how much consciousness do I bring to this moment? Like how present can I be? How compassionate can I be? Like that's healing.
Yeah.
Not that you have the absence of anxiety, because I'm a therapist, an energy healer, a meditator, like a lifelong learner of healing and personal development and growth and spirituality.
Right.
I still have anxiety sometimes, because of that human side.
Right.
So now it's not, do I never have anxiety? Do I never get short? Do I never get angry? Do I never do this? It's how do I respond to myself when I do get anxious? Can I go in? Can I be with it? Can I open to it? Can I open to the present moment in whatever it's presenting me? That's healing.
Where do you draw the line with, I completely agree with you, by the way, completely, sorry. But like, this was going on in my head. Where do you draw the line with when something, I want to paint this like exactly what's going on in my head. When something is like continuously destructive, where do you draw the line with like the gentle parenting of like, it's okay if you, not if you continuously keep doing the same thing, but like, where do you draw the line, I guess? Like, where does the compassion have to sometimes turn into like, listen, like some sternness of like, what's going on? You know,
Sure.
like when like almost like the accountability aspect, like when do you feel that happens? Like if it's almost like you use binge eating for an example, and I'll use like my relationship anxiety for an example. Like when does it draw the line of like, Kate,
get your shit together.
Yeah, enough. Like this isn't fair to you. This isn't fair to the person you're with. This isn't fair to the relationship. Like, you know how frustrated I can get with myself of like, again,
Promised
really?
myself I wouldn't do that.
I promised I wouldn't get upset about this, or I wouldn't get nervous about this, or fearful of this, or reactive to this. And like, ugh, what the fuck, Kate? Like, you did it again. Like, and I know that's not the way to respond.
Yeah.
But where is like the line between like, not the line, but the next step, I guess, or like the other route of being like, all right, this isn't changing.
So
you're not that you're not changing, but this isn't changing. Like something else has to change. And I don't know that I'm really even explaining it correctly of like, where's the line? Because
I think I understand what you're saying.
I mean, like people that might, and I'm not saying I have, but I'm saying I have seen this where like, almost like the victimized individual where it's like, it's okay, you're traumatized. It's okay, babe.
Trauma.
Yeah. Like, yes. Like where does that become like, all right.
Yeah.
Like,
so
the victim mindset is what I'm referring to. Yes. That's what I'm referring to.
Well, the victim mindset is not self-compassionate. It also completely dishonors the fact that you are a divine being. None of us are. Like, we've all been victimized by people, by places, by things, by situations. I'm not here to downplay anybody's trauma.
Right. No, we're not doing that.
it's not compassionate for you to continue to view yourself as if you are powerless. And so that's one thing. So we'll circle back to that in a second, I think, but there is no line when it comes to self-compassion. It does not matter what you did, the offense against yourself that you just committed, the binge eating, the smoking, that guy you said you weren't going to call that you called again, you know, like whatever it is, whatever fuck up it is, to respond to yourself with compassion means that influences what happens next. So if you respond to these things with self-criticism, which is the most common, like, what is wrong with me? Why did I do that?
Yeah, I'm flawed. I'm just
so
like,
messed up. Exactly. Each moment conditions the next moment. So it's like a following of the bouncing ball. So let's say that you mess up, you lash out at your partner, you binge eat, you do the thing you said that you weren't going to do. When you criticize yourself in the next moment, you create more stress, more anxiety, and more shame. And now whatever behavior follows that is influenced by the shame that you're coming from. Yeah. And so this is why self-compassion is so important, is because it's like it's the jumping point to where you go next.
Right.
So to respond with compassion
it's like the springboard.
It's exactly like, it takes you where you're going next. Yeah. So if you have self-compassion, do you think you're more or less likely to binge eat or lash out or let your anxiety explode all over your life?
Yeah, you're less likely.
Less
for sure.
likely. So
but if you're just this flawed piece of shit, like, well, I'm just going to binge again then, because that's just who I am, and that's just what I do.
You've released your control. You've released your higher self has vacated the premises. Yeah. And now you're giving yourself permission unconsciously to continue to play out that role. Yeah. So you're shifting, you're basically even saying, like, even with my flaws, I am worthy of my own love. Like, that's what I was saying before. Like, this is what it means to be human. Right. We fuck up constantly, repeatedly. Just learn from it and try and fuck up less next time. That's healing. And so this idea of, like, where's the line and where do I draw the line between self-compassion and really just giving myself permission to continue to engage in my self-destructive behaviors. Allowing yourself to engage in self-destructive behaviors is not a compassionate choice. And so let's use, like, for me, the eating is such an easy thing to use as an example because it's so concrete. So if
very common, by the way, too. Especially with, like, orthorexia is, like, everywhere now. And so, very relevant.
So if I wanted to practice self-compassion in my relationship with food, it's not that I'm just going to let myself eat anything that I want. That's like the intuitive eating misconception.
Like the inner child taking over. Of, like, ice cream and peanut butter and everything forever.
So that's not a compassionate way to treat my body. So I'm going to talk to myself kindly. I'm going to say, I love this body. I appreciate this body. That's self-compassion in my words. But what you're talking about is self-compassion in action. Yeah. You know, it's like, how do I actually treat myself? So if you think about, let's say, like, the relationship issues, and you're like, well, it's just my trauma. Like, I don't know anything different. I'm not capable. This is just me. Right. Deal with it.
This is where I come from. This is what I know.
If you find yourself saying that to your partner, like, you're creating a barrier to healing for yourself and your partner and your entire relationship. Yeah. And that's not compassionate to do to them. And it's not compassionate to do that to yourself. So we're talking about drawing a line here between giving yourself permission to behave self-destructively and permission to not have to grow and not have to change and not have to look inward and say, what's going on here? Right. That's not compassion. That's not self-compassion. That's laziness and it's avoidance. Yeah. So we're talking about compassion and behavior. So if you are having a negative impact on your relationship, if you guys are fighting a lot, if you're the one who's bringing issues into the relationship, if it's with food, if it's with drugs, if it's with alcohol, if it's with vaping, if it's with gambling, whatever your self-destructive shit is, and you know that, like, even you're saying, okay, I gambled again. I said I wasn't going to. I love you. It's all right. What's going on? Like, and you sat and you got curious with yourself and you set the intention to not do it again, but then you keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it.
That's like the scenario that I'm referring to.
Then you have to say, do I need help with this? What maybe I can't do this by myself. Then the compassionate thing is you go to someone who helps you stop gambling.
Right.
You reach out for help. You read the books. Like, you don't give up, and you don't just say, oh, it's okay. I could just keep living like this. I could just keep doing this. Like, the compassionate thing to do is you go to help. If you have a toothache and it starts out and it's not that bad, and then weeks go by and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, like, you go to the dentist, you know?
Right.
I think the same is true with our self-destructive behaviors.
I agree. And
does that answer the question?
No, that totally answers the question. And I also think it's important that you don't just settle on one route either and give up on one route. Like, if you try with any of those scenarios, like, well, I tried this and it didn't work. It's like, well, try something else. Try something else or do more.
I saw when I was binge eating.
They
didn't get it. Like, and I didn't know my problem well enough at that time to know that I would have benefited more from someone who specialized in that.
Right.
And I just kept like trying to find different therapists.
Right.
And I think I went through about 3. One of them was a guy who was just not helpful at all.
Yeah.
Just didn't know the issue.
Didn't get it. Yeah.
Didn't get it. Another one was a woman who gave me a book about how to eat healthy, which
probably triggered the shit out of
fucking
you.
triggering. It's just like,
she's like, you're really doing it wrong.
My
You're
God.
really
She's
doing
like,
it wrong.
Maybe you need to eat more protein. I'm like, bitch,
You're
that
like,
was
no,
not what
I just need to put the
hear.
peanut butter away. Like, it's not.
Yeah. And then I met another therapist who I had the feeling in retrospect now that she had her own issues with food that were not fully healed. And she understood me, but she didn't lead me out of the path to healing. So
it's funny because that was another question. I knew all these questions were going to naturally come out. That not even a question. It's actually a question / statement that I see with a lot of the people that I work with, that I feel with the relationship anxiety thing, that I feel terrible because so many of them will log on to the point with me, like, and I'll never ever encourage them to like leave therapy. If anything, I'll encourage them, like, if it's not working with them, find somebody else. But they'll come on with me where they're like, they're telling me to leave. Like, they're telling me that if I'm anxious and I'm scared and I'm stressed, that like this is the wrong person. And you've even brought up to me before that there's some therapists out there that don't even like recognize relationship anxiety. Like, they have these more like old school ways of thinking. And I feel bad that I have so many clients log on with me, and then even in like comments on TikTok, I'll see people being like, I'm spiraling, or like they'll message me, they're like, I love this person so much and I want to be with them so badly, but like my thoughts and my fears are getting the best of me, and I saw my therapist and I opened up to them about it, and like they're pushing me to leave. Like, they're telling me you would never feel this way if you were with the right person. Like, this is such a cue to leave. And like it's like not dangerous, but it's I think like isolating sometimes when you do work with somebody who doesn't,
they don't get it.
They don't get it. So I think even going back to where we started, that it is so important that you vet somebody out that like is compatible with you, and compatible, like has like, you know, maybe it is similar past issues, or they've been through what you've been through, or they recognize it. I think that's so important, because I've even thought about that many times throughout like our journey, mostly when I was experiencing like the really bad relationship anxiety, that I'm like, if I was seeing somebody else, like this probably would have went a completely different direction. Like, you really encouraged me. I tell every client that I have, and this is why I treat them this way as well, but I'm like, I didn't change. Like, I'm so lucky to have like somebody that loves me, like a therapist that loves me, that when I will never forget the day you looked at me and you're like, I love you so much. I think you're fantastic. I think you're amazing. You're like, but you are the fucking problem right now. And I remember being like, oh, that is not what I wanted to hear, but like I needed to hear it. And you only were able to say that because you got me. You understood it. Like, it wasn't like you were like attacking me, but you've been in my shoes, and you were like,
called out.
Yeah. And I think, but again, I don't think that would have ever happened if we weren't as compatible. So it is so important that like you work with someone that like gets you, or speaks your language, or speaks your trauma, quote unquote, or
for sure. Also, a therapist really should never tell you what to do.
Right.
You know,
like
if
to guide you.
If you're in a relationship and you're like, I'm not sure, like,
it's totally not their decision.
It's not their choice.
Unless there's like abuse present, where it's like, okay, this is dangerous. But I always say that too. Like, I'm only here to guide you to make your best informed decision, but
like,
I can't tell you what to do.
I might tell clients like, why don't you read this book? Like, why don't you do this meditation? Why don't you do, like, I'm super active
to do this.
and like the tools and techniques that I like to give clients, but I'm never going to say like, yes, I've done the calculations on your relationship. You are 43% compatible. You must leave.
You know,
should
like,
go. Who the fuck am I to say that to anybody?
Yeah.
Relationships are so complex and they're so nuanced, and especially with relationship anxiety, to tease out what is anxiety and what is your intuition is next to impossible.
Oh, that is
I'll never forget that question.
That is, oh my God. I get
plagued
with that still. That's like, I get plagued with it myself and by clients. That is like the number one thing that what's my intuition, what's my anxiety. And in that murky state, they don't know how to trust themselves anymore. So it's followed up with, what should I do? Yeah. Should I say or should I go? And I'm like, one, I can never tell you that. And two, like me, even if I were to tell you that, you're just fostering this behavior of not trusting yourself. Right. You're looking, and there's so many times that I've said to you, like, well, what do you, and you're like, I can't, and you're like, what do you think, Kate? And I'm like, well, I know what I think. You're like, well, what do you think? And then I'll say it, and you're like, well, that's what I think too. And that's what I would have said to you anyway. But
is it normal? That's Kate's number one question.
Is it normal, or what do you think?
If I had a penny for every time over the last 4 years. So let me ask you, is this normal that blah, blah, like,
and you've asked me, you're like, what's normal? What is normal to you? And I'm like, not insane. And you're like, okay, but
no one knows.
Yeah, the intuition anxiety thing is, do you want to like talk about that a little bit? That's like, I actually got into like, not like an argument, but one of my pieces of content that I made last week, I was explaining to somebody conversations that we've had before of like, something that I started doing for myself. And I don't even know if you taught me this, you might have, but I started to like kind of put my thoughts on trial, where it's like, okay, well, like you've taught me like, what are the facts here, right? And then I noticed that I was like, all right, well, if I were to like go to court, they don't care about my emotions or my fears or my perceptions or my feelings. Like they just care about the facts. And I was seeing this video of like people who assume the worst of their partners, how like, what are the facts here? Like assuming the worst, meaning like, what if he's cheating on me? What if he doesn't love me? Like the anxiety, right? And I was explaining to them to put your thoughts on trial and go with the facts. And the facts can lead to the data and the statistics of, has this man ever humiliated you, wronged you, whatever. Right. And I had this woman comment, she's like a intuition coach. And she was like, this is such dangerous advice. You're teaching women to not trust their intuitions. And I was like, I said, well, since you're an intuition coach, you should know, or an intuitive coach, that these women are actually having a hard time intuitively seeing that there's a good person in front of them because they're so clouded by fear. So it's actually not teaching them to not trust their intuition. It's the fact that they actually can't even access that right now because they're so clouded by anxiety. And I say all the time that anxiety shows up like it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, that it, like I've told you, I'm like, I feel like my anxiety shows up at the back door and knocks like and pretends it's my intuition because it'll be quiet like everyone says and calm, and I'll start listening, and then it's like, oh, I got your ear, like let me run rampant now. So like what do you have to say about the difference between the two and differentiating them, and like when they're accessible, when they're not accessible, what they feel like
if you're triggered, your higher self is not present.
And you would say that you're triggered, at least I feel, and I state to people, so like I say when there's like a physiological shift in your body, like I feel like when you're triggered.
And that's tough too, because intuition can show up as a physiological shift, as a gut feeling, right? Like,
right.
It can, but the main difference, I would say, is that your intuition is not going to show up with fear. Like it's going to show up as a knowing rather than
it's confident. It shows up quietly on its own.
Loop. And this is the thing with relationship anxiety specifically, is like, does he love me? Does he love me? Doesn't he love me? Like, are we going to be okay? What if it doesn't last forever? What if he's cheating on me? What if he doesn't love me? What if he didn't mean what he said? What if he misses his ex? What if he... And it's just like a constant stream and a loop and a loop and a loop and a loop and a loop. If you're in any kind of loop, you're in
anxiety.
Yeah, you're in anxiety. Anxiety will come with 4,700 thoughts, whereas your intuition will come more in the form of feelings, and it doesn't necessarily come in the form of words. Like
no, it does. And I try to say that to people all the time. Like when people say it's quiet, I'm like, I don't even know that it has a sound to it. Like I don't think it reminds me of when you hear people talk about like near-death experiences, like when they die and they connect to God and they're like, we were talking, but like we weren't talking at all. That's how I feel like intuition is too. That like I almost don't even realize too when it's happening. I usually realize after the fact that I'm like, oh, that was my intuition before. Or like, oh, I realized that I thought about that thing. But I don't even think quiet is like the normal word for it, because
Right.
it's just, it is literally a knowing, and it's not a fearful knowing. I do feel like it comes with some acceptance as well. Like, I
Sure.
don't think it's like, oh my God, like shit, I'm getting this message, like this is really bad. Like, I remember even, I'll never forget when I left your apartment, after I left that relationship, and I remember you looking at me and being like, you know, you'll be okay, right? And like, if you have to leave this, like, you know that like you'll be more than okay. And I remember getting in the car, and like, obviously that process was like a crazy one, but I remember sitting there and just feeling like it's over. And it was peaceful. Like, it wasn't, though the process after that wasn't exactly peaceful,
Right.
but the reception of it was like, it's okay.
The knowing.
It was just like and again, it was a feeling. It wasn't just like, oh my God, like this is scary, what do I do? It was just like, okay.
Yeah.
And like the rest will figure itself out. Like, it's not, I don't know. It's not, I don't think it's what people think it is. And I don't think it's like, I think it's even hard to explain and describe.
It is. And it's also like something to do to continue to, like, if you've never listened to your intuition before, like, and all you are is an anxiety about your relationship, like, what's the likelihood that that's your intuition? You know,
Right.
like, that's going to be the time where you think this is your intuition.
That's
you know?
so funny, because I had somebody very recently, and I know that she'll be okay with me saying this. I love her to death, but she logged on with me and was like, I just don't understand, why am I feeling so fearful and anxious about my relationship? Like, she's like, I just don't get it. And I'm like, well, where else in your life do you feel anxiety and OCD? And she was like, everywhere. I'm like, okay, so why would you not be feeling it? Like that should be even more of a freeing realization for you of that's exactly what it is. Cause you feel it, like, it's not like you've never felt anxiety before. Everything is so peaceful with this one. And even though that does happen, but she was like, well, I'm also very OCD about this and fearful of this. And I'm like, okay, so like, why wouldn't it be here right now? Like, it would actually be weird for you if it wasn't here. Like, that would kind of be like not on brand for you if it was just like not here right now. So
and it really is just so delicate, because for relationship anxiety, and anyone with relationship anxiety, is actually very difficult to receive love and to just trust it, and and I don't ever want to encourage anyone to not listen to your intuition. If your intuition is telling you this isn't a match, a divine selection match for you, then end your relationship.
You're free to go, right? You're free to go.
But if there's even an inkling that, like, it might be just your fear of vulnerability, your fear of commitment, your fear of being trapped, your fear of being betrayed, like, that's something for you to look at.
To explore,
And again, maybe you go through a 6-month therapy process to try and determine whether or not this is anxiety or this is a legitimate concern and you're not compatible with this person.
Right.
But it would be so worth the journey of understanding, like, why am I so anxious about that? Is it this person, or is it relationships in general? And that is such a valuable journey to go on. And sometimes it lands in like, okay, I need to leave. Like, that was actually my, like, yes, I've had relationship anxiety in the past, and also I wasn't with the right
100%. We've expressed that with both of us before, that it's like,
that was when,
but that's when anxiety, I feel like, was serving its purpose. That it was like, this isn't right. Like, this isn't, it wasn't being like, you know, irrational or.
But both were happening simultaneously. And I couldn't really see that until I had a therapist reflect back to me. Like, hey, it doesn't really seem like you want to be in this relationship, or it doesn't really sound like there's a lot of compatibility here. Or like, hey, why are you still, like, what is still drawing you? So if you're not sure, explore a little bit more. And then you might also ask yourself, like, does this, a therapist will help you, or a coach will help you. Like, does this person remind you of someone in your past? Like, is that why you're feeling anxiety? Like, is this a pattern? Do you just push everybody away? Like, you can also look at your relationship history and just get so much information about yourself. And I love doing that with clients, because it's like, what draws you to people? What pushes you away? Like, what are the qualities? What are the common denominators between all your previous partners? And so you start to understand yourself a bit more. And I think that that can really help you tease out, like, oh shit, it might be me. Like, it might just be, I'm just afraid to actually be loved, which was the case in my case with the relationship I'm in now. When I first met him, I was trying to push him away because there was so much compatibility, and I knew that I was going to have no escape route. I would have no reason
They didn't have
to leave
when they don't have an exit sign. It is
there
like,
would have been no reason whatsoever.
Just the same thing for me, where it's like, there was no exit sign. I'm like, I better find one.
And so I'm like, shoot, like this is going to be the real thing.
Yeah,
like
this is it.
This is it, you know? And that was really fucking scary for me. And I'm so glad that I know myself well enough to know, like, no, Cena, like, ride out the anxiety, like be with yourself, love yourself through this. Like,
this is a good thing. Like, this is,
and I'm like an ROCD success story.
Yeah, you are.
I'm getting married in a month.
I was just gonna say, first of all, you were like the relationship that I'm in right now, as if you're not about to be like a whole ass wife in 30 days. But like, seriously, you are, and like it's, I don't know. I think that like I just love that story, because I think a lot of the people that I talk to too, that they're like, does this ever get better? Like, does it ever go away? Like, can I ever actually be like open to this and accepting of this? Like, will I ever feel calm in this? Will I ever feel happy and not scared all the time? Like, I know that like what works for me personally is kind of just like diving into the fear. Like when it's like showing up and it's like trying to get you not to do something, I have found that literally just doing it anyway is what starts to like make it go away and get less intense and be like, oh wait, nothing bad happened. Like,
that's true about anything.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when it comes to like OCD type stuff, like exposure therapy is the number one treatment for OCD. It's like face the fear and realize that it's okay.
Right. And I feel like by leaving the relationship, that's the compulsion. Like you have the obsession of go. And then when you leave, you might feel the relief at first of like, oh wow, like I can breathe again. Like I'm not anxious anymore. But then like, it's not really, it didn't go anywhere. It's just,
No.
Yeah.
And that was actually like one of the defining moments for me too. Like when I first met Frank, like I knew by our third date that he was someone that I would really like date long. He was just, I'm like, this person is just like so awesome. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But then I started to, like my fear started to come in. I started to have like, my fear is always abandonment. Yeah. Like just coming from my own history.
Same.
And so that started to show up and I started to push him a little bit. And where was I going with that? I just totally lost my train of thought.
You were saying that like in the first couple dates, like you knew that he was going to be the one.
Yeah. Like I had that feeling. But then when it started to really become real, like when I started to really like feel like I was in love with him and whatever, that didn't take very long. That took like 4 weeks, 3 weeks maybe. That's when I was like, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know. Like maybe we're just too different. Like maybe whatever. And when I started to push him away, I actually felt terrible.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel that relief. And in any previous relationship, when I was like, they're talking about marriage or talking about long term, like, oh yeah, I'm out, you know.
Same. You remember I was panicking. I was just like, oh no. This is not good.
I always felt relief in those moments. But when I started to push him away, I was like, this is not the right choice. No. Like at all.
No, you start to panic and you're just like, wait, this does not feel good. This is not actually what I want.
Right. And so he was so patient with me because he saw like stuff I didn't even see and he knew what was going on for me better than I did. And like, I'll share too that the day that I pushed him away, and this didn't even, I'm so self-aware. This did not even go through my mind.
I remember the story.
It was the day that my brother died. Yeah. It was the anniversary of my brother's death.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't do this.
This is too much.
This is too much. We're too different. I just don't know if it'll work. And I just, he was like, what are you saying? Yeah. I'm like, I just think we're different. He's like, how are we? We're so alike. Right. It's insane.
Right.
And so he like, you know, after like we like kind of processed it and worked through and obviously stayed together.
Right.
He was like, I knew what was happening.
I remember you telling me that he was like, I knew.
I knew that was a really challenging day for you. Like September in general is a tough month for me. It's Kevin's passing. It's even my mom's passing. It's the same. How
do you feel about getting married in September? Is that intentional?
It's a new story.
Good. I love it.
It's a new fucking story. Yeah. And so that fear all came up and it was just ready to be healed. Yeah. And it was ready to be healed in a healthy relationship. And I've had many dreams and fears about Frank dying. Yeah. You know, because of what I've experienced.
I have dreams all the time that Taylor, he's either in my dream and I can't contact him. Yeah. I don't have his number anymore. Or like he's not answering me. Or like I actually have dreams where I wake up or in my dream, I'll say to somebody like, I'm going to go see him, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? What am I talking about? They're like, you're not dating him. Like, and I'm like, what do you like? It's like, it never happened. Either he's not there. I can't get in touch with him. Or, and it's like, it's devastating, but it's that abandonment coming out of like, oh my God, like that, or even just the fears coming out sometimes where it's like, oh, this is terrifying.
Yeah. Very scary.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had to face that fear of vulnerability. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, my intuition's telling me this isn't right. It was like, I'm just really scared right now.
Yeah.
But this is also the difference, and I think it's really helpful for anybody that has relationship fear of any kind, is when you lean in rather than lean out, how does it feel? And whenever I lean into Frank, it feels like the best and safest, most loving feeling in the entire universe.
And you've always taught me that. You're always like, Kate, what happened? Like you are the trajectory of where this goes, and what happens when you lean in, and it's like everything just like heaven and earth just align, and I'm like, oh, this is like the greatest experience ever, and I think that's an important point to make of like when people will come to me about that as well. I'm like, where do you feel like you're contributing or not contributing to this right now? Like, where do you feel like you're pulling away or like not doing this or not doing that? And I think a common thing that I hear too sometimes is people being like, this isn't deep enough for me. Like, this isn't like, it feels very surface level. And it's like, well, how deep are you going with them? It's like, well, he has to go first. And it's like, well, no, actually, like if you're not meeting them there, they're not going to meet you there. And I find that like you said, if you just lean into it and just go in head on, like I shouldn't say it always works out, but it is way better than the opposite. Like it's way better than being like,
yeah, you get what you give, you know, and you are the determinant. You are.
It's like an energetic
transaction. You're 50% of how this relationship goes. Like if you want a really fucking amazing relationship, like who do you need to be in order to create that kind of bond and connection with someone? What is a version of you? What are the thoughts you need to think? What are the behaviors you need to exhibit? What are the ways that you need to love and support your partner? Like what, you have so much power in creating the relationship. It's not just, oh, I find someone and they're the best and now I'm happily
that's what everyone
ever
thinks.
after.
Everyone thinks. And when it's not that, everyone's just like, oh, I gotta go. And it's like, I think, I don't know if that just comes from like the codependent nature of things of like, someone should just show up in my life and everything should make sense. And I should never have to like.
Happily ever after. Romance novel. Disney.
And it's funny. I was going to ask you too, in these questions that are all coming out, like, what do you think is the biggest relationship reality or the hardest relationship reality pill to swallow?
There's no such thing as the one.
Agreed.
There's no such thing as the one. When you think that there's only one person and they are this epic, like perfect match for you, no human can measure up to that.
It's unfair
expectation. You know, it's just not like that. Like, and also if you meet someone and you think that they're so perfect and there's no, like you might be missing like some stuff, and you're also not listening to your intuition and you're not allowing it to develop to decide like whether or not the person is the right person for you. You're not going to know that in the first date. You're not going to know that even after a few weeks of knowing them. I knew that Frank and I would have a long-term relationship, but I didn't know if we'd get married. I didn't know if he was going to be my life partner. I knew I could date him for a long time. I knew we had a lot of compatibility. Those are the things that you know, but really only after a certain amount of time can you really know if someone is someone you want to spend your life with. You need to see how they handle their challenges, how they treat other people, how committed they are to their own growth, where's their self-worth, and most importantly, what are their values? And do we want the same life as each other? You know, so it's so much. And rather than thinking that you're looking for this one person, the one person you're really always looking for is yourself and your connection to your higher self and God, spirit, universe, whatever, divine, whatever you want to call it. And then when you're looking for a partner, you're looking for someone who you love, who you feel connected to, who you feel in alignment with, and who you can co-create something really, really special and create a really magical. You don't just find a great relationship. You don't find a great person and then everything's great. You make it.
You can find a person who is great, a great person. But I think you've also taught me, which was so hard for me to swallow at first, and now it's like actually the greatest realization, that it is actually so much more romantic and beautiful and sexy to like build something together than be like, it just worked out and we're just soulmates and we were just pulled together. But to choose, to make the choice of like, almost like even when it's hard of like, this is really hard, but like I'm choosing to be with this person, and I'm choosing to be better and work together and do this together. And I'm choosing to be here in the times that like I'm not my best or they're not their best. Like to me, that's way more loving than just like, we're just divinely attached. And like, we didn't even choose this. Like it chose us, you know, like I just think it's so much more. And I didn't like that at first. Remember you telling me that like over a year ago, and I was like, I don't like that. And then I remember when I met Taylor, I was like, oh wait, this is way more beautiful. Like this is way more beautiful of like working at something together and building something together and like getting to know each other on a way more intimate level, because you have to, because you're building something and you need to know what you're like through hard times and through this and through that. Like that is way more beautiful than the mindset of like, he's my soulmate. Like I think people think the soulmate thing is like romantic, and I don't think that these people, by the way, like aren't soulmates. I just don't think there's one. I think there's many people that come into your life for like these multiple reasons, but I think the romantic soulmate thing that I'm referring to, like the narrative that's out there, is like, I actually think that makes people stay in bad situations because they're like, well, they're my person, and like we'll get through anything, and like we'll always stay together. And it's like, I think it makes you overstay places that just aren't good anymore, because because that maybe at one point you had this soulmate mindset of like, we're bound together forever. It's just the two of us till the end of time.
And I'm going to call you out that you thought that in your last relationship.
And that's where I learned that. And I remember coming to you towards the end of it and being like, you remember you telling me like, you can go. And I was just like, no, like we'll figure it out. Like we always do. And you're like, you don't have to. And I remember as like somewhat feeling like offended that I'm like, but we will. That. I'm like, but like, we'll figure it out. And then it was actually like a breath of fresh air that I actually remember going home and saying to him, he was wildly offended, but I was like, we actually don't have to, like, we don't have to make this work at all. And he like, well, what do you mean? And I was just like, we don't have to. Like, I was like, I just found out this really cool thing that like, we don't have to.
Oh, I actually have free will.
Yeah. And I remember like, I think it ended like, honestly, a couple of days after that, if not like the next day, because I was just like, I don't want that anymore. Like, I don't want to like overstay somewhere that is so not right for me and so not healthy for me, just because I think that we had this like cute, you know, little beginning that like, that felt super attracting, which looking back was actually just like trauma repeating itself and showing back up and
validation.
How do you feel about that too? Like I was trapped by that in so many other relationships of like the initial butterfly and excitement that is really sometimes just like old situations trying to show back up and repeat themselves, and feeling like that. Like I think it's common to feel that soulmate bond with somebody at first. And I don't mean like the spark. Like and I know that there are absolutely situations where there's butterflies and they are positive and it is exciting, and it's just like, but how would you explain that situation where like it's not a red flag, but it's like, be careful. Like this could be something else and not exactly this like soulmate situation that you think it is.
I mean, that's...
I know it's so nuanced because like I said, I know that there are beautiful positive situations where it's like we just feel so connected and so drawn to each other and loving. And
sometimes it's just that way when you meet someone and it stays that way consistently. The main thing that we're looking for is consistency. Yeah. We don't want, the example I always use, and I've probably said this to you, is that we don't want the firework. We don't want the thing that's explosive in the beginning. Oh my God, we have so much chemistry. We're soulmates. We're like... You don't know that with knowing someone for a month. You just really don't know it. You don't know them well enough. You haven't seen a 360 of how they are in their life.
You have not seen every version of them.
But you want the slow burning candle. You want the consistency. You want the person that's gonna like allow you to be yourself over and over and over and over and over again. So when you feel really excited by something in the beginning, but you don't know them that well, you haven't met their family, you don't know what their values are, you don't know how they treat other people, you don't know the way that they make decisions, you don't know the way that they spend money, you don't know what their beliefs are about themselves, you don't know where their self-concept lies.
You don't know how they are when life gets hard or when they need to show up.
Then you can't possibly know that that person is your soulmate. You just don't.
Yeah.
You just can't know that yet. It's, I don't know how else to explain it other than that. There was something else I wanted to say about that, but it kind of flew out of my brain.
It's all right. It'll come back.
I think we make our soulmates too. And that also, sometimes people come into our lives as soulmates for a certain period of time and then they leave. Like it's a relationship where we both grow and we both change. And like, who's to say that that wasn't like a divine success, you know, and then we move on to something else.
I definitely feel that way with like, I feel like I used to look back at like old relationships and consider them like failed relationships. Like even like the one that I was in for a long time before this one, but I'm like, actually like that needed to happen. Like that wasn't a fail. It just wasn't, the relationship just didn't continue, but it doesn't mean that it was a failure at all. Like, I don't think that there really is like I guess there can be wrong relationships for you, but I don't think any failed relationship is actually a failure. I think it's actually like a stepping stone in the right direction of just like, no, there was so much to learn from this. Also, if you let it be that way, obviously not everyone does that. Not everyone looks back and counts their lessons and moves forward with it. But yeah, I think that's also like a positive way for like other people to look at like breakups or like things ending, that like, it's not a bad thing, you know, like there's always something to learn. And again, like the fail is not really a fail. It's actually with any failure, honestly, in life, like
there's so much to be learned.
Yeah.
Why did I pick this person? Why did the relationship end? What was good about it? And what wasn't so good about it? And why not? And how did I handle that? And why did I tolerate that? And it's just, relationships are just a huge, huge area for self-understanding.
And I think with breakups too, like I think something you taught me as well is that like, I think people make it too much about like when it ends, like about the relationship and the connection and like I lost this, but like I think there comes a period of time pretty earlier on than people think that like it's not about that person anymore. Like you can kind of like let that part of the grief go, and like it's actually about like you said, like what do I want to take away from this? Like what are my lessons? And I think there's lessons for everybody. Like I've even found with people with like cheating and stuff where it's like, well, he was a piece of shit and he cheated on me. And it's like, maybe, but like, why did you stay? Like, I'm sure the disrespect was written on the walls long before the actual act of it. Like, and it's like, there's always something, you can always learn something. I would like to think from every relationship.
Always. And those betrayals are so difficult to come back from. And there's like self-worth that's tied up in there.
So much,
and there's so much, but everything can be a learning experience. And if you choose to see it like that, then it has meaning. Yeah. And now you don't have to blame yourself. You should take accountability. Like if there's some way that you contribute, nothing is ever 100% somebody's fault. Right. It's not like, oh yeah, my ex, he was the worst. She was the worst. Like it was all her fault. She was just so critical and she was this and she was that. And it's like, all right, well, what did you do? Right. How did you, everything in a relationship is like a game of like tennis. It's like to the extent that I, hit it this way, this is the way that you return that serve to me, Right. And then we just are going back and forth, hitting this energy back and forth in our relationship. Right. And so we're all responsible. And even some of the accountability there is like, did I know when I met this person, did they tell me they weren't ready for a relationship? Right. Did they
weren't available?
But I pushed it and I forced it. And, there's just so much there.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's great. There's so much that we could talk about with relationships. Mm-hmm. There's so much. I want to see like what I haven't asked you at this point, because there's stuff that you talked about, but there is more relevant stuff that I want to still ask you actually, I'll ask you this one. What would you say to somebody who's in a relationship right now, whether it's just like boyfriend, girlfriend, it's engagement, it's marriage, that they're having hard times and they find that their partner is resistant to therapy or working together or changing things? How would you encourage them, or how would you tell them to encourage this person to want to do these things together and want to work on these things together? Because going back to our first question, I think some people have misconceptions of what therapy is or the help is, or even if it's just like any kind of work. So how would you, somebody that's listening that is in that space right now of like, I don't want to go, I really want to work on these things, but my partner is either resistant to it or closed-minded maybe, like what would you say to them?
Well, one other misconception about therapy that we didn't talk about in the beginning is that it means that there's something wrong with you.
Oh,
like
totally
going to therapy means you're crazy or you're so messed up or you need help.
Right.
So like just letting that stigma go, I think is really important. But also like to answer this question, like I think the question is like, what do you do when you want your partner to seek help, but they're not seeking help? If your partner is willing to work on the relationship with you, that's an excellent sign. But therapy isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
Like that's not everyone's process. Like one person's yoga practice is their therapy. Another person's like business creation is their spiritual journey. Like you just you can't force, like row your own boat. Like if therapy works for you, great. And commit to it. But as long as your partner is open to some kind of growth with you, if they're willing to do a date night with you once a week to build the connection, if they're willing to, plan future trips with you to build new experiences, if they're willing to read the same book as you and then talk about some of the stuff in it, if they're willing to have weekly check-ins with you so that you guys keep like checking in with each other, if they're willing to practice your love language or even know and hear about what your love language is, like it's a good sign. If you're asking your partner to work on the relationship and you're saying, I will take any form that is comfortable for you.
And they're saying no.
And they're saying no.
Right. You have your answer.
Run.
Yeah. Agreed.
Because this person isn't building anything with you. And they're selfish and they don't really care. They have no empathy about what the relationship is like on your end. And they're not willing to work on themselves in any way, shape, or form. And they think that they don't have anything to work on.
Right.
Then, you're going to have a really hard time like building the type of, for the people that want the type of relationships that we want, the conscious, loving, deeply connected, like there are many people that have relationships that are like,
they're okay.
It's not the main highlight in their life.
No, right.
They're like,
they don't need
I
that.
have this partner. Yeah, we're going to have kids. We'll have a family. We'll do that thing. But like,
my their lives are kind of separate and
that's that's fine.
But I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday that like there are people like that, like that, like
and
they're
no
fine with that, right? They're totally fine with that. It's what works for them.
But if you are the type of person that is deeply connected to yourself, that is very self-aware, that wants a partner that to build like a really divine connection, you need someone that's in that with you, that's willing to talk to you, communicate with you,
the willingness,
and try, and like,
agreed,
really show up for the relationship. Then whether it's therapy or it's something else,
whatever it is,
it'll work,
right? I agree. I did want to ask you before going back to the relationship anxiety thing. It's a question that I did have, and it popped just right back into my head. So I obviously deal with people all the time that are having relationship anxiety, and a lot of the times it's in like their first healthy relationship. So it's a two-part question. What advice would you give to somebody who's in their first healthy relationship and they're really struggling right now? And the second part, which is something I really don't see answered commonly, and I find that they're becoming the more isolated population, what would you say to their partner that's on the receiving end of it? I know it makes me emotional to say because of the shit that my poor Taylor, but like it makes me think like, what would you say to them? Because it's hard, because the way I think about it sometimes is like when I have somebody in my session who's like, I can't stop picking fights and I'm just doing this. And like, we're teaching them compassion and this, and like, use this as evidence to help yourself. But I always think sometimes where I lag off with them that I'm like, I wonder what I would say if I had their partner in my session of being like, I love this woman, but she's nagging me and she's fighting with me and she's not letting me in and she's pushing me away. And I don't know what I would say to them. So like, what would you say to them?
So should I answer part one or part two first?
Well, yeah, whatever. Go to part one and then we'll go to part two.
Part one of the question is what's my advice to someone in a healthy relationship
in their first healthy
terrified?
And they're getting triggered and they're just acting, they're almost being the toxic one right now. Like they're being the not so healthy one.
I mean, there's a lot of things. Let me think about that for a second. I don't want to give just like a snap answer.
Take your time.
The first thing is to be compassionate with yourself and to, like, your number one intention right now is to differentiate the voices in your head, the voice of fear and the voice of the higher self. This is the main question that we're talking about, is like, why am I so afraid? What is fear and what is real? What is fear and what is my higher self? What is fear and what is intuition?
What am I perceiving and what's reality and things like that?
So the only way that you're going to have any clarity is if you form a loving, compassionate relationship with your fear. Your fear is there to protect you. It's there because it has a damn good reason to be there. You've already been hurt. You've already been betrayed. You've already been fucked over, and you've already had your world shattered. If you didn't, you wouldn't feel what you're feeling right now, because the subconscious mind gets set up through really powerful experience. and repetition. So anything that happens repeatedly, anything that happens that really, really causes a great impact on you, you now have a sensitivity to it in your subconscious mind. And then when something walks into your life or someone that reminds you of that original hurt and pain, now your anxiety is like, oh, Kate, I'm here for you. Don't worry. I got this.
Right. I realized I was sleeping last time, so I'm going to work overnights now, and I'm going to just work overtime.
Your anxiety and your fear, if it had like a tagline, it would be never again.
Never again.
I will never let Kate feel that vulnerable again. I will never let her feel that shitty about herself again. I will never let her feel that way again.
I'm going to make sure that never happens. And I'm going to scan and I'm going to look and I'm going to find it for you. Like, it's like trying to help you. Like, it's like, I'm here for you. I got it. Like, don't worry, I'm here.
And so in loving that fearful part of yourself and saying, I know you're scared. I hear you. I'm here with you. And just really understanding that voice feels so purposeful and so powerful, but it's really protective in nature, I think is the number one thing that I would tell anyone with any kind of anxiety is like, understand that anxiety is at one point was exactly what you needed to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And
It served
just
its
outdated,
purpose.
you know?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It's just an outdated response where what was yesterday's medicine is today's poison. What worked when I was, let's say, 12 years old to protect myself because my mother had passed away and things were hectic and crazy and I had to focus on my brothers more than I focused on myself and whatever. Like all of those safety strategies of being alone and not connecting with another person and certainly not trusting any men.
Right.
That helped me a lot because I was in a really dangerous, sad, scary scenario in which I really had to look out for myself and my feelings were irrelevant, you know? And getting close to anyone was very dangerous. And then I learned that lesson again in my 20s, a decade later, when my two people closest to me were my brothers, and then one of them passed away.
Right.
And so...
And it just came back again. It's
and like my fear's like, told ya.
Yep, it's always, told you so.
So valid.
Told you so.
You know?
Yep, I knew I was right.
And so be so fucking gentle with yourself. When your fear shows up, it means that you have a reason to be afraid or you have had a reason to be afraid in the past. And so really nurturing that connection with those wounded parts of you, your inner child, you know, the parts of you that carry those wounds and those burdens, and to know and understand that this is an opening for healing for you.
This is an opportunity.
It doesn't even really have anything to do with your partner other than the fact that they're here to be an unconditional loving force to you. And you're like, I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like, that sounds like too much for me. I don't do that. I'm alone, you know? I don't deserve that, or I don't know how to do that, whatever, all the limiting beliefs. So your work in that moment is to see how much can I connect to myself? How much can I love myself through this? How much can I open to my fear? It's a beautiful journey to go on. And it's one that I wouldn't trade for anything because I know myself more now through this journey than without it. Same with the eating disorder or with anxiety and depression and all of the shit that has been the fallout of childhood trauma and other experiences in my life. Yeah. So connect with yourself, love yourself as you go through this process. That's what I would tell someone who is in a healthy relationship for the first time is like,
freaking out.
I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
And also, this is going to be rough for a little while.
This is going to be hard.
You know?
Yep.
But really, really loving those parts and starting to differentiate like, oh, okay, there's my protector. Do you remember what I said to you about my protector? She wears a leather jacket.
She wears a leather jacket. Yeah. Mine has her arms crossed and she's such a bitch.
And like we have multiple types of protectors, you know, but she wears a leather jacket and she's got combat boots on. Like she's protecting my 10-year-old, you know, and I love her for that. But I am in control of my system. Yeah. I get to hand her the microphone or I get to take it away. Yeah. I get to give her love or I get to give her more criticism. Like it's up to you. We have so much power. Yeah. Like when you feel like you get into a relationship and then you start acting like the worst fucking toxic version of yourself, you feel powerless. Yeah. You're not powerless. Yeah. And so remembering that too, I think is really helpful. Is like, this is an opportunity for me to understand my system a little bit better and start to really come back into my power of like, Thank you for that information, anxiety. I know you're scared.
Right, it's information.
I appreciate you. I love you. Tell me your story. What are you afraid of? Who are you protecting? What are you protecting me from?
Right.
Do you think we could do this a little bit differently? So then you really get into like the subconscious rewiring of the limiting beliefs on a really, really deep level.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're still trying to just, oh, why am I still doing this? Like, this is a good relationship. Shut up, Cena. It's fine.
Right.
That doesn't work.
No.
You need to go deeper than that at the level of consciousness. Like, heal whatever is that limiting belief, and then you go forward.
Yeah. I tell people sometimes too that like, I find that it works is I'll tell them like, or ask yourself like, how old is this? Like what are the years on this right now?
Yes.
Is this 20 years old? Is this 5 years old?
Yes.
Like, is this like, where is this coming from?
Yes.
But I do remember, remember telling you when I first started dating Taylor. I remember you being so excited. And then I remember it was probably within the first week of us dating, me sending you my first voice note. And I remember I was outside of the tire place getting a new tire. I just got my hair done. And I think we're actually going to Philly in 2 days. And I think that's where we were going. We were getting ready to go on our Philly trip. And we were only talking for like 2 weeks or something. And I'm like, why am I going away with this guy? I don't even know him. And I sent you this voice note that I'm like, I'm freaking out. Like, I XYZ. And I will never forget the voice note that you sent me back. I can hear it still in my head that you're like, hello, my friend. I knew this day would come and I've been prepared for it and I've been waiting for it. Like you knew that was like, and it came into my head when you said that like somebody in their first healthy relationship, like congratulations, but also this is going to be really hard. Like I just remember being like, so many times I remember reaching out to you and thinking like, oh, this is going to be the session that she's going to tell me like, this isn't good, this is bad. And every single time you'd be like, nope, it's fine. Like this is a safe, healthy person. And like, you can lean into this, but I will never forget that day. Like I remember what I was wearing, like everything. And I remember freaking out and you being like, I knew this day would come.
I remember too. I was like, yeah, I knew as soon as you met him that there was going to be,
I talked to you about him before we even started dating. Yes. I remember saying to you, I'm like, I have such a crush on this guy. I don't know what to do.
Taylor, if you're watching, I called this months in advance. Before it happened. Yeah, and I didn't say it to her because I didn't want to scare her. Also, thank you for the crystal. I asked for it. But I had a feeling, because my intuition is pretty strong. Yeah. I don't market myself as an intuitive therapist, whatever, but half the time in sessions I'm channeling, you know? And so as soon as she brought you up, I had a feeling that you and her were going to have a relationship. But months go by and I didn't want to say anything because she gets anxious and scared. And if I was like, you're going to date that guy, she'd be like, wait, I don't know. What should I wear to the gym? Should I go? Should I not go? Should I text him first? Should I
cancel my membership?
Literally. So I'm like, I'm going to let this play out. She's a big girl. She'll make her own choices.
I remember.
But I also knew, especially after the relationship that you had come from, and not even just that relationship, but that breakup was so challenging for you. And then the wounds that pre-existed even that relationship. And I knew that getting into a healthy relationship, because this is the process that I went through myself. And also I've walked so many other people through it. I've just watched, like, we keep selecting partners that are incompatible for many reasons, because
so many.
We don't really want to be vulnerable. You know, we're okay with it being a surface level relationship.
We know that they can't really give us what we need, and we know that there's not as much.
We're okay with it because we don't feel worthy of more than that, whatever. But I had a feeling that when you did meet someone that was compatible, that was healthy, that was going to be 100% available to you to have a long-term, like, real relationship with, one where you were your authentic self, that was going to be really tough for you. And I want to say too that this isn't everyone's, just because it's been our journeys doesn't mean it's everyone's. Like, for some people, like, you just meet someone and it's like great. It's great. And that's it. And there's no anxiety.
Absolutely.
And it's lovely. But for those of us with challenging pasts and challenging attachment dynamics and limiting beliefs and self-worth issues, like, meeting someone who loves us unconditionally
is like unfathomable.
Is really, really new for us.
I remember what you said to me, and it's so factual, and I think it stands true for so many people, that you said to me, you were like, your biggest fear and your deepest desire are one and the same. Like, you just want to be loved, and you just want to be adored, and you just want to be seen, and you just want to be valued, and that's all you want, but you are also terrified. That is your biggest fear in the world. And I remember feeling like feeling how conflicting that feels. That it's
Yes.
like, oh, I want it so bad. And it's like, oh, but don't get too close. Like, don't like, never mind. And then wait, no, I do want it. Wait, never mind. And then sabotage. And it's like, it's so true. That is like one of the most confusing. And I think even like painful and again, conflicting experiences of like what you want is the same thing of like what you are terrified of. Like it's so
and
hard.
it's why we have to, somewhere in our conversation, we talked about facing your fear and
You
like
have to,
leaning in. Like that's,
you have to choose
and
that.
when you lean in and it feels good to lean in, that's how you know.
Yeah.
Frank was the first relationship that I had that like leaning in felt really, really good.
Yeah.
And also, that if I had anxiety in other relationships or doubt, like relationship anxiety a lot of the time is really just doubt. Like, is this okay? Is this going to work? Is he my person? Or am I his person? Am I good enough? Am I pretty enough? Whatever. With him, he was the first person that I can honestly say, the only person, and this is one of the, like for me, one of the ways that I knew this was the right relationship for me, is that he was the person I wanted to work through that for and with. And in other relationships, when it's like
I want to push through this with you.
I didn't really care to do that.
I literally could not agree more.
I didn't want
to go through it.
I didn't want to read 20 books on attachment. No. I didn't want to own my own part of like what was wrong in the relationship.
You remember me feeling that way too, that I was like, I don't know. I don't really want to. Like, I don't really want to work with this person. It's not worth it for me.
Yeah. But when I met him and in dating him and falling in love with him, it was like, I really genuinely want to be the best version of myself for him because he deserves that.
Yep.
And I am not letting this person go. So even though I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid it won't last. I'm afraid of being vulnerable. I'm afraid that he'll be unhappy in 2 years. I'm 2 years older than him. I'm afraid that he'll be like attracted to younger women. You know, maybe not right now, but maybe in 10 years from now or whatever. Like so many fears. And like, I'm like, no, I'm going to work through this. Yeah. I'm going to work through this for him.
You know when someone's worth it, when something's worth it. And it's like, kind of like you said to me that it's like, this is going to be hard. But like, even when it got super hard for me, I remember being like, it's still worth it. Yeah. Like, it's still like, there's nobody, and I would say it to Taylor all the time too, that I'm like, there's nobody else that I would want to actually push through this with. And it's not me just being like loving and doting of like, there's nobody else but like genuinely like I feel like this is the place that I want to fight through this and work through this. And I guess going back to that second part of the question of, again, like the questions that I get about that so frequently, I feel so bad from people in my DMs, but like what would you give to the person that is on the receiving end of it right now, and they love this person, but like they're being pushed and they're frustrated and they're too struggling right now?
It's hard not to personalize it, but it's really not about you.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, when they're fighting their own demons that you didn't create, that like your role and function is to be a consistent source of love and support for them, but to not be a doormat.
I was just going to ask you that. When is it not enough is enough, but where do their boundaries come in that are still loving and supportive? And I'm here, but also this I'm not tolerating this anymore. Like if there's continuous nitpicking or whatever it is, like what are they supposed to do? Like if they do want to say and they don't want to leave, but they also don't really want to be a doormat anymore, like what are they supposed to do? What is still, in your opinion, the loving, healthy thing to do for the relationship, but also for themselves?
I think that every person is unique, but if you are that partner, you have to decide where your boundaries are about how much you're willing to accept. And you have every right to say, like, you know, you're nitpicking, you're criticizing me. It's really hurtful. I'm wondering if we could maybe sit on this, and then if you still feel this way tomorrow, we'll talk about it. Or you have every right to set a boundary of like, I've asked you not to speak to me that way before, and you've done it again, and that really hurts me, and I need some time to heal from that. And being honest about the way, like holding them accountable for the ways that their actions are impacting you. Because let's face it, if you're the toxic one and you're pushing and pushing and criticizing and nitpicking and pushing away, you're testing them.
Yeah.
And so I would tell the partner, like, you're being tested, and it's not because they're trying to be assholes to you. They really still don't believe that they are worthy of your love. And so if you are willing to stick it out with this person, you have to love them unconditionally and know that they have a part of them that doesn't feel worthy of you. And in those moments, to come at them with compassion and love too, of saying, like, are you fearful right now? Do you know that I love you? Do you need reassurance right now? Like, are you criticizing me because you really want me to feel bad about myself? Or are you criticizing me because you don't trust me? And do you not trust me because I've given you any reason not to trust me? Or do you not trust me because of something that somebody else did?
Right.
I'm here. Like, what we need is a strong, steady, consistent, as someone who experiences relationship anxiety, is a consistent partner. But no one by any means should feel like they are like, well, my partner has issues and trauma, so I guess I just have to deal with this. No. Like, no, you don't. You get to say, like, this is where I'm drawing a boundary. Right. I don't want to be spoken to like this, and I need a few days. Right. You're allowed to retreat.
Right. This is the repercussion of you speaking to me this way. Yes. And you need to know that this is what happens if you do and if you will. And that's kind of, you are answering it, but I was going to ask you, like, what is the difference between unconditional love and unconditional tolerance? Like, I think sometimes you think, like, well, if you love me unconditionally, like, you should put up with all my shit. And it's like,
that's not true.
What would you explain to somebody the difference between, like, they can love you unconditionally, but they also don't have to have unconditional tolerance and unconditional patience for you or for what you're bringing into this right now?
Just that, just as you just said that, like, everyone has their limits. Yeah. And loving someone unconditionally means that you love them in all their forms. And the way that I love myself unconditionally is that I know, like, those two parts of myself, like the 50% that's neurotic and human and the 50% that's divine, I love all of her. And so you loving your partner means that you know that they also have 50-50. You know that they have anxieties, neurotic tendencies and fears and worries and insecurities. But when that becomes abusive to you, when that violates your need for love and connection, when you're part of this also. Like, just because your partner has trauma and is working through their shit doesn't mean that you have to stay. Like, you also have a choice too. Right. You get to say, like, I'm not willing to do this with you. In the same way that you and I both had these feelings of, like, this is the person I'm going to work through this for. The partner on the receiving end is also going to
make that decision.
Yes.
Is this worth it? Is this the person that I want to work through this with them?
This is the person that I'm going to work through this with, because I see that they are worth it.
Right. I see that this isn't really them. I see that this is just a part of them right now that's coming out. And agreed.
Yes. But, also, like, really not hesitating to share, like, hey, just so you know, when you speak to me in that way, or when you say those things, or when you doubt our relationship,
this is how you make me feel.
Here's how it feels for me.
Yeah. I feel like that's actually that lands so much better for the relationship anxiety person than, like, which I know it's hard because, like, this, we then end up triggering our partners as well. But I feel like that lands so much more nicely or better than, like, pushing them away or getting angry and getting defensive and being like, you always do this shit. Like, I think,
that does.
I think when somebody, and I get the frustration, but I think when somebody really in any relationship says, like, you're really making me feel this way right now, like, I think that almost, like, lifts the curse on the relationship anxiety person, that they're like, oh wait, that's not what I want. Like, I definitely don't want to make you feel like shit or, like, poorly about yourself, or, like, I think that's almost like where, like, the code gets cracked sometimes. But when it's met with, like, whether it's, like, resentment or anger or defensiveness, like, I see that happen a lot with people as well. And they're just like, and then all of a sudden, like, everything just starts to rot and get eroded. But, like, when they do find out, when their partner does creep in every so often and be like, that really hurt me, and that really made me feel low about myself, like, they'll log on with me sometimes, like, crying, that they're like, oh my God, that's not what I wanted. Like, I was just scared. Like, I just thought this, I just thought that. Like, I did, like, that's the last thing I want to do is hurt this person.
It gives the relationship a new emotional depth, because when you just lash out, like, oh my God, you're always fucking criticizing me, like, you're saying that again, and I'm so tired of this, and there's no emotional depth because you're not communicating like, hey, that hurts my feelings. When you communicate that, it actually gives your partner the opportunity to be like, all right, well, I'm actually just feeling really insecure right now. I remember working with a couple one time, and they fought a lot, and they always fought when both of them were feeling insecure. And what I had to teach both of them, instead of bickering and arguing and blaming and pointing fingers, was for both of them, and they both had very strong egos, to just instead say, I'm feeling really insecure right now.
That's
instead of starting
hard.
a fight.
When
And
you're
it's hard. It's hard
when you have
to
an
be that
ego,
person.
or when you're like defensive or stubborn, it is so hard to say, I'm
hard.
feeling so insecure right now.
It's also very challenging for the partner on the receiving end of the anxiety to be tolerant and to be patient. So I want to acknowledge that too, that like it's not that easy to just be the person who's like, okay, we just talked about this 3 days ago. I just reassured you.
I just told you this morning that I loved you.
Yes.
Why are you asking me for the 5th time today?
Right. And, you know, it's also the person who has the anxiety too, to be very mindful of the OCD component here of like reassurance seeking is the compulsion. And if we want to break the obsessive compulsive loop, then we don't follow through on the behavior. We recognize the obsession of like, does he still love me? Does he still love me? Should I ask for reassurance? Should I start a fight? Like recognize that and try and go inward and say like, okay, I'm just feeling nervous right now. I'm feeling insecure. Like, how can I be with this? Like, I have the urge to ask for reassurance or to start a fight, but I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to ride that out. I'm going to love myself. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to paint. I'm going to journal. I'm going to cry, whatever I'm going to do. But you know, trying to make it easier on your partner to not always be asking for that reassurance.
I have somebody that wrote me something very specific. I literally wrote it down in quotations, and I want to read it to you because it answers that exactly. Find which question, or asks that exactly. It was, okay. We kind of covered a lot of this, but I'll read it to you anyway. So they said, I don't want to use my traumas as an excuse anymore, but I also can't help when they show up. How do I handle triggered moments where I don't feel that control is available to me? I want to react differently, but every time I swear I'm in the right, and they put in parentheses, in the moment. And then when the smoke clears, I realize I was not.
Oh, isn't that a moment for all of us? Yeah. So the question is,
I'm triggered. I think
moments where I feel like I have no control.
I'm triggered and I feel like I have no control. Mm-hmm. Like almost like how we're saying like, well, like go for a walk, go journal, like go cry, do it. But they're just like rage. Like, no, I got to fight. I got to say something. I have to do something about this. Like I have to come at this person right now. It feels like uncontrollable.
Yeah. No control. I'm going to translate to you're on autopilot.
Yeah.
And when you have automatic reactions, it means that this doesn't happen out of nowhere. You don't go from 0 to 100 out of nowhere. You know, you go from 0 to 1 to 2
We've spoken about that.
4
That the flame was probably lit 4 days ago, and now this was a drop of gasoline.
Yeah. And so
you didn't just jump to 100 today.
What this really means when you feel like you lose control and you just snap, it just means that you don't have enough self-awareness yet. And so I'm not going to tell you like, oh yeah, like you're just going to have to ride out those moments. Like you're going to have to develop so much awareness before, during, and after this happens so that over time, this pattern and this behavior and this automatic reaction is going to soften. Mm-hmm. So there were times where I would binge eat and it felt like it happened out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But when I slowed it down.
When you zoomed out, right.
Zoom the camera out, I would see myself restricting 3 days in advance. I would see myself intermittent fasting, skipping meals, ignoring my anxiety, pushing myself too hard in the gym, not getting enough sleep, overworking, being a perfectionist, and then I binged.
Yep.
The binge doesn't just happen. The emotional outburst doesn't just happen. Nope. Nothing just happens.
And I want to say that coming from my mouth, and you've spoken to me about it. Anytime that I have ever been in one of those moments of like, I feel like I just can't control this right now. Like I'm so triggered right now. I feel so insecure. I feel so scared. When I also feeling in the moment, like this is the appropriate reaction. Like I need to call this shit out. And then when I would zoom out, it was always, I haven't worked out in a couple days.
Yeah.
I booked way too many. I overbooked myself this week. I have not spent any time alone. I haven't journaled in 3 days. I haven't prayed in 4 days. And I'm like, okay, you are disconnected from yourself right now. And you are like, I remember at least with myself feeling like you are feeling insecure and dissatisfied with yourself. You are feeling disappointed in yourself about how you've been lacking showing up for yourself. That's not what your partner is thinking right now. That's what you are thinking about yourself. And you are now projecting it in this situation of being hypervigilant, that they did something that you can now translate to as unloving or unattentive or sneaky or something. And it's really just coming from, again, like, this has been going on for 4 or 5 days. This did not just happen right now. Like, this is, and I also will say, and maybe it is because I'm a more intuitive person, but I do think that even in the women that I've worked with, that when we did zoom out, they all knew when it was happening days prior.
Totally.
They all had something saying like, stay home tonight. They all had something saying, being like, slow the fuck down. Don't work, don't work till 5 instead of 3 o'clock tonight. Like, go home, go exercise. Like, they heard it. They heard it, but they were just like, it's all right. I can do it. It's fine. Like, I'll push through it. Yeah. And then the explosion came.
Always. So that is one thing that I would say, but I will also offer like a technique and a tool.
Yes, definitely.
I love getting triggered. I don't
Please teach me how to love it, because
I don't love the feelings that come with being triggered. But do you see
it as like an opportunity of, I think I'm like, getting there now, where I'm just like, like what, like, how can I kick this now? Like, what, like, how can, it's like taming like the dragon.
It's so revealing. Where you still
I love that, shifting your perspective with it, of like getting excited when it shows up.
All right, here's my fear. And like, here's my like lower frequency energies of my human side. Like, what is here for me to heal? Anytime you like have some sort of explosive moment, or you're really triggered, or your emotions don't really match what's happening right now, is a moment of like, go in. I need to go in. These are the times where I'm like, can you explain that to somebody? Because they're going in.
Like, they're obviously like, there's things that I think we're aware of like what leaning in means, or but like what, like to somebody that has like no or like knowledge of this kind of vocabulary or this kind of like conscious way of living, what does going in mean?
Going in means willing to be with your own thoughts, and in a really intentional way, with curiosity and without judgment. So a lot of mindfulness, a lot of like openness to, okay, if I were to eliminate distractions, turn off the TV, don't be doing this while you're driving.
Put my phone down.
Like for me, this happens in water. So like, I'm in a bathtub, but I don't have to be in a bathtub. I could be in sitting on my living room floor. And maybe I could be out on a walk asking myself questions, whatever. But it's really just a willingness to be with your inner thoughts and to really see what's there.
The willingness is so important.
I'm so curious when I don't feel well about something, even, and it doesn't have to be a big trigger, but it's like, okay, like, what don't I feel good about here? Like, what's coming? What part of me is activated by this is a good question to ask yourself. But the main thing here, and it's what I teach anyone on a healing journey, is like, you have to go in. There's something here to be revealed to you.
It's not here for no reason. This is not just,
especially the triggered moments. So the technique that I would offer is, if you are this client listening and you have this moment of like, you're on autopilot and you just react, right after is a moment for you to go in. Right after that happens, I want you to retreat from your partner, and I want you to focus on yourself. And I want you to ask yourself some questions. First, what are my thoughts? This is called trigger tracking. Cognitive therapies call this something like the cognitive cascade. What are my thoughts? And you write down all your thoughts, like, he doesn't love me. He shouldn't have been looking at his phone. Whatever the thoughts are. What are my emotions? I feel annoyed. I feel irritated. I feel embarrassed. What are the body sensations? Tune into the physical body. Where are you holding this? Like this anger, this anxiety, where are you feeling this? And then what's your urge right in this moment? And
I love that. What's the urge?
What do you want to do right now? Well, I want to tell him to leave, or I want to break up, or I want to go eat something. I want to, I want to be self-destructive in some way, whatever. I want to cry. I want to journal. The urge isn't always self-destructive. And then what is the action that is actually going to follow? What am I actually going to do? What am I going to choose?
What am I choosing? There's a huge difference between the, like, I think people get the urge and they follow the urge. And I think that's where the powerlessness comes in of like, well, no, what am I going to choose to do anyway?
Exactly.
I know what I want to do, but what am I going to choose to do?
So for you to have a conscious moment after you were just unconscious, you bring yourself back online. So after a binge, I would sit down and say like, okay, what happened? What was I feeling? What was I thinking? What was going on for me? Like, ask yourself some questions, get curious. And now I'm back into the mode of consciousness. And now I get to choose what to do next. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to nurture myself. I'm going to take a bath. I'm going to practice self-care, whatever. And now the next time that you start to have those similar thoughts, you're going to notice them. This is how you dissolve the autopilot, is just with more awareness and more awareness and more awareness.
Right.
So even though you just did that thing that you didn't want to do and you felt like you had no control, you regain your control immediately when you practice mindful awareness of what you're feeling in the next moment. So now you're back online and you're less likely in a few days from now to do that same thing again because you're connected to yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
or
I love that.
Answer the question?
Answers the question. I have 2 questions to that. 1, how do you retreat from your partner without triggering your partner? And 2, what if you are in a place where you can't retreat? What if you guys are out to dinner and you think he's looking at another woman and you can't just go in the bathroom and sit in your bath and take out your journal? What about in the moments that you can't, quote unquote, retreat?
In the moments where you can't retreat, this is where your awareness practice comes in, is like, oh, there's my anxiety.
It's here.
Oh, there's my fear.
Yeah.
Your anxiety is going to show up. Like, again, the healing process is not that anxiety evaporates.
Right, no.
It's just that you have a new relationship to her.
Right. This doesn't happen immediately.
No.
You're not going to try this once and then wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm not triggered anymore.
And I didn't stop binge eating because I stopped having the urge to binge eat.
Right. That didn't go away.
No, I stopped binge eating because I stopped listening to that voice that was like, screw it.
Do it.
We'll exercise double tomorrow.
Right.
We deserve it.
Right.
Whatever. And for the voice of ROCD is like, you know what? No, he's a jerk. He shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
I'm right. I'm going to say
that
something.
protector is back.
And then you just blew up your whole evening.
Right.
And now later you're going to shame spiral.
And now you're in shame. Right. And now you're in shame. And like you've told me before, and I tell everybody else that nothing happens in shame.
No,
Nothing
there's no
good
progress.
happens in shame.
There's no growth in shame.
Yeah.
There's no self-understanding. There's no learning. There's no healing that happens there. So in that moment you say, hello, anxiety.
Welcome back.
I see you. I love you.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like if you have a partner that does that repeatedly and that actually is looking at other partners.
Right. That's
totally other issue. Just want to address that. Like
right. Yes, that's not
valid.
We're not saying like to go shove that down and like get over that. Like
exactly.
We're totally not saying that. But yes, we're talking about. I would also disclaim that this whole conversation we're referring to healthy, safe, compatible people.
Absolutely.
We're not talking about if disrespect is actually continuously happening in your relationship and you're feeling genuine, true unsafety and like mistrust because there's evidence pointing to that.
Of course.
Like
we probably should have said that an hour ago.
Yeah, we're talking about healthy, compatible, safe people that have never given you a real reason to feel this way.
Yeah.
My last 2 questions I want to ask you is this. What is your definition of love?
Oh, what is my definition of love? I've never been asked that. Patience, tolerance, and choice of choosing, like romantic love.
Yeah.
My definition. I don't know that I can define
I still think that
because it's not a word.
No, it's not a word.
It's an action.
Yeah.
Love is something that you do. It's not something that you find. It's something that you create every day, and it's active. Love is alive. It's a
it has a pulse.
It has a pulse, and it's something that I create constantly in this relationship. And if I don't nurture the relationship, if we don't communicate, if we don't spend time together, if we don't loving. Check in with each other, that's not love. That's autopilot.
Right.
And that's like, all right, we're together, we're married. Like it is what it is. Like, so love is creative
You have
and
to
it's
keep doing it.
intentional.
So if you're in autopilot, you have to make the choice to get out of it and take actions to get out of it.
Yes.
If you're in like a 20-year marriage right now and you feel like it's stale or boring, like it's not just going to show back up, and it's also not just doomed, but you have to do something.
And I don't know, I can't give wisdom around being in a relationship for 20 years.
Right.
I don't know.
Neither of us are, but
I can give wisdom around what is love. It's a living, breathing thing between you and your partner that you both feed, and you both nurture, and you both partake in growing it and taking care of it and giving it
it's like a plant.
Yes. Love.
And if you don't feed it, you don't water it, you don't give it, it's just going to die.
Yes.
Totally. My second question, or my last question, is what is your, and there could be multiple things here, but what is like your number one relationship tip and advice for anybody?
I thought you were going to ask me about a practice. Like, what's one thing like someone should be doing?
I actually think I wanted to ask you that earlier.
I thought that you we're going to ask
We'll do that one next,
like
because that will be important, actually. So this will be the second to last question.
Okay, wait, so
but
what is
this
it?
one is, what is your number one relationship tip or advice?
My number one.
To keep it happy and successful, and like a successful relationship tip for somebody. You've given me one before, and I think it was one that you heard recently, and I don't know if it's still yours, but
I don't know.
It was a scorecard one. That one I thought was
don't
awesome.
keep score.
Yeah. But I don't know if you have one that you actually is yours that you feel is just a good tip that everybody can keep in their back pocket.
Can I give two?
Yeah, you can give as many as you want. Yeah.
The first, I would say, is to prioritize the relationship. Like, if you want, whatever you want to create in your life is going to be influenced by where you put your energy. And so if you want a really satisfying and fulfilling romantic relationship, you need your energy to flow there. You need to think about that person. You need to think what's going to make them happy. You need to commit to that. So it's the same thing if you want to build a business, or if you want to get in shape, or whatever. Like,
it's not going to happen on its own.
Energy flows where your attention goes. So, that would be the first tip, is like, you need to put energy in if you want a really great relationship. Mm-hmm. Tip number two, okay, I have three. Tip number two would be to communicate, like to be really open with your partner about how you're feeling and what's going on with you, and to share, to be vulnerable with them. But tip number three maybe isn't what, or maybe it is what people would expect, but it's to love yourself.
I was going to say, when you said number four when you said number one, I'm sorry, of nurture the relationship, what came into my head too, I thought you were going to say, but number two was also nurture the relationship you have with yourself.
The relationship that you have is always going to be reflective of your self-worth.
Always.
And so you can't manifest what you don't feel worthy of receiving. Mm-hmm. And so if you want a beautiful, loving, divine relationship, you need to know that you're worthy of that. And you need to have so much self-love.
Comes back to you.
And if you feel like you don't have self-love now, work on that. Yeah. Work on that with yourself, with your coach, with your therapist, with affirmations, with whatever. But loving yourself is so important to show up in a relationship and to be able to really be present for it.
Agreed. Totally agree. So then the last question, which I guess kind of does wrap all of this up, and you were just asking about it before, is what do you think? I'm saying one, but there could be many qualities or traits, but what do you think is like the one quality or trait or practice of somebody who is a mentally strong or a mentally resistant person? Like, what do you feel comes with that? Or a practice that's necessary for that? Like, not something that they're born with. Like, what's something that they have to intentionally be or do to be that makes them a mentally strong person?
Well, what do you mean by mentally strong?
Mentally strong, I'm actually referring to almost like everything that we just discussed. Like, mentally strong, which I think people would think is what I mean, is I don't mean that they don't get affected by anything. Yeah. I don't mean that they're emotionless or they're detached or disconnected. Mentally strong, I mean that they're actually just like any strength in life. Like, you're not really strong if you've never been put in situations where you've had to practice strength, right? Like so it's mentally strong to me is like almost these situations that we're talking about showing up in relationship anxiety, in relationships without anxiety, in life. Like, when these things do show up, mental strength to me is being able to make the choices that we discussed of like, I see where the urge is, but I know what the choice is. And making, like, to me, in my opinion, not going with the urge and making the choice is a mentally strong person, because the urge feels way stronger. Like, usually what's easy is not what's right. Usually what's
Yeah.
hard is what's right. So like
Yeah.
what do you think makes somebody capable or able to be that kind of person that they can tap into that?
Hands down, without question, without any doubt, or like, maybe I should say this, or maybe, is self-awareness and mindfulness. Mindful awareness and self-understanding is your baseline for literally everything else that you want to create in your life, or any growth that you want. You can't change something you don't see. You can't work on something you don't know exists.
Right.
So
how do you recognize it's a problem then? How could you start today with self-awareness if you're not self-aware?
If you start practicing mindfulness of your thoughts, emotions, and body sensations, here's another practice. Every so often throughout the day, do what I call a self check-in. What am I thinking? What am I feeling in my emotional field? And what's going on in my physical body? And if you do that a couple times a day, every day, you are a more self-aware person. If you don't obviously I would suggest like a formal meditation, like just 10 minutes a day. Just sit and breathe and notice what comes up.
What's here. Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that formal. Mindfulness is really more about the moment to moment of like, what am I feeling right now?
Yeah.
What's coming up in me? What's going on here? And being willing to be open and curious to it, because
before those triggered moments, like when you're not triggered, like doing it just throughout the day of like, what's up here? What am I feeling?
Until I started practicing mindfulness, which was, what year is it? 24?
24.
So I've been practicing mindfulness for about almost 10 years. So I've been meditating for almost 10 years. And it wasn't until I started meditating that I realized I had a problem with food. I was completely unconscious.
Right.
Like I thought it was normal to have cheat days and to overexercise and to like, I thought I had willpower, which is something else I'll speak to. Like you're looking at it from like a mental strength perspective, but I think that the strongest people are actually just aware. And I don't think that it takes willpower to break out of destructive cycles and habits. It takes awareness of, there's an urge.
Right. There's people that can have a strong willpower but have no self-awareness at all.
At all.
Right.
And willpower runs out. That's finite.
Right.
Your awareness will never, ever run out.
Literally ever. Even when we leave this world, it will never be gone.
Never. Yeah. Like that's exactly.
It will always be there.
So for anyone that is like wanting to grow spiritually, personally, for anyone that wants to improve their anxiety or their relationship anxiety, or for anyone that's just looking for
wants to
like
improve in general,
just some kind of like, I'm ready to grow and evolve a bit, is self-awareness. And I would say either formal, like just practice mindfulness for 10 minutes a day, or just really start dropping in on yourself and start really asking yourself, what's going on in my body, what's going on in my heart, and what's going on in my mind. And just notice, this is when you know yourself, that is the beginning of self-regulation.
Right.
It's the precursor to being able to self-regulate. And we can't shift we're on such autopilot with our thoughts, triggering the same emotions, triggering the same body sensations, triggering the same actions, triggering the same scenarios. And we're just on repeat. And it's why people say people don't change. And I'm like, people change all the time.
Right.
They just work at it.
Right.
You know, so if you're
I remember somebody saying that like human change is highly possible, it's just not highly probable, meaning like everyone can, but like, is it probable that everyone will? Like probably not.
Probably not, because waking up means getting out of the autopilot multiple times a day.
And once you're up, you can't go back
multiple
to bed.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
And it's something you've said, like, I kind of wish I like wasn't so aware.
Yeah, I'm like, I wish I could just go back to bed. I'm like, I wish I didn't know what I know now. And I don't, like, obviously I feel that way in harder times, but like in times like now, I'm like, I'm so glad that my eyes are open to myself and to everything. But yeah, yes.
I've also shared with you that when I started meditating was actually one of the most difficult years of my life, was because I started to see more. So when you start to raise your self-awareness,
it's not always.
It's tough, but also it's why it's so helpful to have a coach or a therapist, because what I was missing was the compassionate presence and space, holding that for myself.
It's so important.
To be like, okay, like I have a lot of anxiety around food and my body image, and like, okay, that's okay. Like, it's all right that I'm feeling this way. You know, like I was missing the self-regulation piece. So raising awareness at first can be challenging. But I want to also harp on like, if I'm boiling it down to this one thing, right? Like if you're going to practice anything, it's like really getting self-understanding and self-awareness. But like the real practice of mindfulness is not just like meditating on a mountaintop,
Right.
It's a compassionate space to hold for yourself to experience whatever it is that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
My favorite quote, everything's okay when I'm okay with everything.
Do you know that I thought I sent you a picture that I've literally painted a canvas of that. I have it in my apartment because I love it. Yeah. It's just like, explain that to people. Yeah. It's my favorite though, because it's a fact.
So the mindful awareness is like, okay, and now this is coming up. Oh, okay. And now this is coming up in my experience. Oh, okay. And now I'm feeling this. Okay. I'm having anxiety. Of course I still have anxiety. When it comes up, that's how I act. I'm like, I'm panicking right now. Where was I panicking? Yesterday, I was driving. I got caught in that rain.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. It was bad.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was scary.
Bad. I couldn't see. It was scary. And I started to,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm panicking.
Oh, it's happening.
I don't get nervous about my nervousness anymore,
Right.
So the knowing yourself is really the basis of all wisdom and all growth, and really being able to hold this compassionate, loving presence and space for yourself, because you're a human. You're going to have a lot of thoughts. You're going to have a lot of feelings. No matter how much you evolve, no matter how much you grow, no matter how much you change, you're never not going to be human.
I agree. And I guess my real final question to wrap that all up is, do you think that this is accessible to everybody? Yes. Do you think this healed thing that we're talking about, quote unquote healed, that everyone can have it?
100%.
I love that.
I have no doubt. We're all one. We're all the same.
Right. If one of us can, the rest of us can.
100%. That's why, like we mentioned Jesus and Buddha before, they are examples of what is possible for every one of us. We don't have to live like Jesus and Buddha, although we don't have a full, clear picture, because we've only been fed the stories about them rather than ever experiencing them directly. But in any case, that's possible for all of us, is to feel, and not that should even be our ideal, but the ideal is to be a more peaceful version of myself than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
That's it.
Literally the day before.
And everyone's possible. Everyone's capable of that. That's possible for absolutely every single person on this planet. And also, you deserve it.
Yeah.
We all deserve it. We all deserve to feel at peace. No matter who we are and what we've done and what our history is and what our trauma is, like, we're moving forward. Like, we've all had our shit, right? And I want to validate everyone's trauma, whoever has been listening to this and us in this conversation. I see you. I love you. I'm sorry that happened to you. But the present moment is your point of power. Yeah. What are you going to do now?
What are you going to do about it now?
Yeah.
You see how it's showing up, and what are you going to do about it now?
It's not your fault that happened, but it is your responsibility to choose who you are becoming.
1000%.
And so, yeah, it's possible for all of us.
I love that. Would you come back?
Yes.
You will?
Yes.
Did you have fun?
Oh, so much fun.
I had so much fun. I really hope that, I don't even know how long we just went now, but I seriously hope you guys get everything that was intended out of this session. It honestly went like I had 20 cards here of questions we were supposed to ask, and I think naturally we asked some of them, and this conversation was just so authentic for me. Once again, it was so healing. I hope you guys got everything out of it again that was intended with it, and everything that I just got out of it again. Before we end, how can people work with you if they want to work with you? Where can they find you? Is there anything to expect from you in the future? Social media, like anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, my website is cenahoey.com. My Instagram is Cena_therapy.
I'll put your links and stuff. Yeah, I think it is.
I'm so grappy with social media.
I'll tag you, and I'll definitely like attach your stuff for
and
sure.
I'll be teaching some more upcoming workshops and things. I'm partnering with another therapist to do some cool things and create some stuff. So,
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Just love you. You're the best. Thank you guys so much for watching
you.
and being here. I had such a fun morning. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed it just as much as we did. And
this was like an absolute gift to me
same.
to see you in your
I feel like this just like
so
sealed
awesome.
our relationship.
I'm so grateful.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. Seriously, you have no idea.
Thank you for trusting me for 4 years.
Always. And I will always trust you forever and ever. And I appreciate you. You are like the reason I know you don't like me giving you all the credit, but like I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without you. I would not be recording this here without you. I would not be in the relationship I'm in without you. And
who knows?
You're a big part of me. You always will be. Like we say, we're soulmates. Yeah. All right.
We've healed alongside each other.
Yeah, we have. We really have.
Yeah.
We really, really have. And it's a beautiful relationship that I'm like forever grateful for.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.